Eire Nua trade. The present trade relations of Ireland are almost entirely with Britain. The value of this trade is large compared to the national income. This is especially true of the six-county area where Stormont politicians in public speeches like to point out their trade statistics as evidence of economic strength. There is, however, no reason why there should exist any direct relation between trade figures and national income. In reality, far from being evidence of strength, this trade pattern is evidence of economic weakness in that it suggests a high degree of dependence on imported consumer goods paid for by exports of a relatively small number of specialized products. Thus, the economy is particularly liable to fluctuations of prosperity due to changes in demand in the export market. Six-county trade, for example, in linen, is handled by British merchants. No foreign trade organization exists whereby six-county exports might be promoted under a national type of image. Indeed, this is expressly prohibited under the Government of Ireland Act. Efforts have been made in the 26-county area by means of state-sponsored bodies to establish independent national trade links in non-British markets and to establish a positive image for Irish goods in the British market. The surface of this problem, however, has barely been scratched. The vast bulk of our exports still go by British-controlled channels and are haphazardly promoted by small independent agencies or producers. One positive step has been the initiation of a warehousing enterprise at Liverpool, jointly owned by a number of Irish manufacturers. Apart from the acquisition of B&I Steam Packet Company by the 26-county government, no serious inroads have been made into the cross-channel shipping monopoly, which extends to the ownership of the handling facilities at most of the major ports. This contributes to the high cost of trade, especially in the six-county area, where it received adverse mention in the Official Isles and Cuthbert report on the six-county economy. Imports are in the hands of a multiplicity of agents. In cases where imports require technical backup services, the latter are often seriously in default. There is little national control of the spending of foreign currency. The trade situation is made spuriously easy by the ready convertibility of sterling. The result is that importers are able to speculate with the world produce on the Irish market, although in the 26-county area, to some extent restricted by tariffs. Nearly all countries, therefore, have unbalanced trade relations with us. A balance of payments crisis lurks continually round the corner, even under the conditions of relative prosperity. Hence, the alleged need for the high level of liquid sterling assets held in London. Direct trade links with distant markets barely exist. Tropical produce is handled by British firms and transshipped in Liverpool or London. Irish Shipping Limited spends most of its time carrying foreign produce between foreign ports. The means exist for developing direct trade links with the newly emerging ex-colonial nations, but it requires deliberate steps to be taken to break with the imperial structure in order to do this. Recently, a Dutch shipping line was blackballed by the other shipping interests for daring to run a direct line from Dublin to Trinidad. Irish manufacturers, to their credit, supported the direct link. Similarly, efforts by Mayo farmers to import basic slag from Belgium through orthodox channels were unsuccessful. Finally, a direct shipment by Dutch coaster was arranged. Efforts by exporters to gain the cooperation of the representatives of the 26-county government have been met with rebuffs. Evag House diplomats seem to move in circles too high to soil their hands with trade. Thus, various state agencies work away in watertight compartments labeled diplomacy, export trade, and industrial development. Foreigners take advantage of this to deprive us of our wealth. The Sinn Féin government will seek to diversify trade as much as possible. It will seek especially to build up trade with the developing countries in mutual interest, taking their exports at a fair price in exchange for industrial, agricultural, and transport equipment suited to the early stages of economic development. For example, rock phosphate from Algeria would be exchanged against farm implements. Dairy produce and meat will be increasingly in demand in areas where temperate agriculture is impractical. Trade with Eastern European countries will be expanded. The general aim will be to have as much free trade as possible, but reserving the right to use tariff and quota restrictions where these are necessary. Trade with Britain would of course continue, but this would be realized by the development of marketing organizations as subsidiaries of Irish producers, suitably coordinated by an efficient state trading organization. Links would be developed with all possible outlets to the British market, especially with the British consumers' cooperative movement. The type of trade agreement which has in the past crippled or restricted our economy will be avoided. Any export line subject to stop-go treatment would be oriented toward some other markets with which long-term favorable trade agreements were possible, or else allowed to lapse in favor of some product less vulnerable. The long-term trend would be for industrial processed agricultural goods and industrial goods to become the dominant exports rather than agricultural raw materials. The amalgamation of 6 county and 26 county economies would initially have the effect of reducing the relative importance of external trade to the economy as a whole. Thus, much of the heavy engineering potential of Belfast would be used to speed the rate of industrial development in the country as a whole, rather than as an earner of foreign currency. Imports would be controlled and rationalized. The agency established by the government for controlling imports would have at its disposal a technically competent staff with laboratory facilities, so that a rational choice may be made from the goods on the world market. A restricted but sufficient range would then be imported and assembled cheaply in bulk, or manufactured under license if necessary. This agency, which would be part of the National Development Authority, would be responsible for seeing to it that any specialized equipment imported had adequate spares and service backup. A licensing system would operate with priority in the allocation of foreign currency going to goods needed for national development. The state importing agency would also be responsible for standardization of imported specialized components, so that spare parts will become increasingly interchangeable between different types of equipment. The changeover to the metric system will become possible at an early date if suitable standards are imposed from the start by the National Development Authority and its associated agencies. Sinn Féin will develop vigorously all attempts to push us with Britain into full membership of the European Economic Community. On balance, the disadvantages of full membership outweigh the very doubtful advantages. Sinn Féin seeks a democratic national parliament, not a rubber stamp assembly taking orders from the undemocratic Commission in Brussels. Nor is the EEC Council acceptable, in which we would have, at most, 2 votes out of 30. Ireland's sovereignty, independence, and neutrality are not for sale to any foreign power or group of powers. Sinn Féin would do as Sweden, Switzerland, Finland, Austria, Iceland, Yugoslavia, and many other European countries have done. Seek associate membership or a trade agreement with the EEC while diversifying trade as much as possible. The campaign for the revoking of the 1965 Anglo-Irish Free Trade Area Agreement will be intensified and its disadvantages publicized. Should Ireland be forced into the EEC on England's heels, Sinn Féin would resist and oppose Brussels' domination just as the Irish people have resisted British domination for centuries.